committing our TPP countries to make decisions on approval of these products based on science. And for 20 years, we've struggled with non-scientific approaches, with rhetoric taking the place of science and decision making, and we think this is an important aspect. It also includes language that would require countries to quickly share information and consult in the event of low-level presence of a biotech event, where a variety might be approved in one country, not yet approved in the other. But if there's no food safety issue, they can work together to make sure countries have what they need to keep trade flows moving. And there's a first ever annex on organics. It's a thriving and growing aspect of our agricultural sector, the organic industry. This annex talks about the ability to share information and work toward equivalency procedures, where organic certification in one country can be recognized in another. And for those of you who might work in that industry, in fact, finding the ingredients to meet demand and get your product to market can be difficult, so we think this is helpful. But I think we have to also remember that when we look at TPP, we're trying to move this one process forward, but the rest of the world isn't sitting around and waiting for us to do it. So when we think about the value of the TPP, it's not just the tariff elimination, the steep tariff reductions, the new TRQ access, the rules. It's the fact that if we fail to do it, we will be falling behind because other countries are actively moving their trade agendas forward. And so we can't think there's a world today and a world with TPP. We have to think about the world with TPP and the world if we fail to have it. And if we fail to pass it and other countries are continuing to open their markets to each other, there's a significant cost to that. And the Peterson Institute has just come out with their study last week suggesting that that cost per year is about $94 billion, or $700 per household per year for every American family. That's significant. The gains from trade affect our pocketbooks, and for US farmers, 20% of farm income comes from exports, so we can't afford to lose that opportunity. And this is just kind of a pictorial evidence of that. If you look back to 1975, there basically was the EU, some customs unions in the Caribbean, and that's kind of what our regional trade agreements look like. In 1995, we see that that has increased. The EU had expanded its membership. There were links elsewhere, but mostly within regions. We have NAFTA, if you look at the US, just a few lines coming in and out. But by 2014, the number of regional trade agreements that had expanded around the world, it's exponential. And we frankly aren't the endpoint on enough of those lines. And more are formed all the time. So we put our eggs in the TPP basket for an important reason, which is that we had 12 countries who were willing to meet very high standards, and then to be able to take those standards to attract others later in time to make sure we were all meeting the potential of what these agreements could be. But there are competing models out there. This is not a hypothetical. You saw all those lines of agreements that are going forward, and China in particular has another model that they are trying to advocate and advance throughout the region. And you can see all those countries in red are part of this activity. Many of them are TPP partners too, part of the RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. But what RCEP lacks is that commitment to making sure that every line is liberalized, that it's as comprehensive as possible. And it's lacking in the standards placed too. No stronger SPS provisions, no provisions within the agreement on worker rights and environmental protections and high standards for intellectual property. All things we count on and are part of what makes doing business in the US a lower cost and lower risk endeavor. And so again, we want to be the one setting that standard and asking other countries to join us rather than having another model do it. And so all of you know that we're in the middle of the process to take TPP across that finish line. And so we finished our agreements in October, or we finished the negotiation in October. Shortly thereafter, the President notified Congress of his intent to enter into those agreements. That started a 90-day clock where we made the full text of the agreement, summaries, fact sheets, all of that information fully available to the public. That 90-day review period ended around early February, and then we moved to the third step here, that all of the parties signed that agreement. What comes next is the submission of that agreement to Congress and through a draft implementing bill, which then starts under Trade Promotion Authority a specific clock that gives the House Ways and Means Committee a certain number of days to report the bill out, and then a specific number of days for the House to vote, for the Senate committee to consider, and for the Senate to vote on that agreement. So what we are doing now is actively working with congressional leadership of those committees to talk about how and when to submit that bill and to build support and educate stakeholders and members about what's in the TPP. So if you want to know what's in it, if you want to share with others what's in it and why it's important for U.S. agriculture, here are a list of resources. We have a number of places that you can go that show both in narrative and in a handy infographic form what happens by commodity and per state. We want you to plagiarize heavily from these fact sheets. They're in a form that non-trade experts can see what's in it for dairy, for beef, for rice, for wheat, what's in it for every state in the union in a very easy way to look at. So again, we encourage you to take a look at those and to share them widely. So with that, I will end there. That's kind of your 30,000 foot shot, and turn it over to Audrey.
Well, great.